Hey, work from homers, Adam Schroeder here. We love bringing you this podcast, and thousands of you have proven that it's been helpful for you. But since time and online storage space aren't free, Naresh and I wanted to come to you personally to ask for your financial support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workfromhomeshow and help support the show. And we appreciate your support at any amount you choose. That's patreon.com/workfromhomeshow. Thanks for your support. Let's get to the show.
Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. Shout out to our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. I'm Naresh Vissa with Adam Schroeder. Today we have Brian R. Alexander with us. He's a former columnist for NBC and #1 best-selling author of multiple books, including Glass House, The 1% Economy, and the Shattering of the All-American Town, The Chemistry Between Us, Love, Sex, and Science of Attraction. In the new book, The Hospital, Life, Death, and Dollars in a Small American Town. Brian Alexander, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you're a prolific writer, journalist. Your books have done extremely well. I think one of them, Glass House, might have even reached the New York Times bestseller list. But let's talk about your book, The Hospital, Life, Death, and Dollars in a Small American Town, post-pandemic. And we cover healthcare issues a lot on our show, not just healthcare, but health and wellness. So as far as COVID, as I call it, COVID-1984, as far as COVID-1984 exposed, tell us about what it exposed about the magnitude of America's healthcare crisis.
Well, it's not just the American healthcare crisis. It's a general American sickness. And by that, I mean inequality, low-wage jobs, a variety of mental health issues. America is undergoing profound pathologies at the moment. We try to ignore these as best we can. And yet here comes COVID-19. And the last 25% of the book, The Hospital, does deal with COVID-19. And the pandemic just rips those fault lines wide open. Let's take inequality and race, for example. The fact is that African Americans, Latinos, other minorities are dying at a much higher rate than white people are. Well, why is that? Well, one of the reasons is because they are a lot of our so-called essential workers. They've got to go to work. So they're going to grocery stores, they're going into meat packing plants, they're going on board ships, and we praise these people, but we don't want to pay them and we don't want to protect them. And therefore, they're getting COVID-19 at higher rates and they're dying at higher rates.
Why do you think there's, obviously every country has its healthcare problems in some form or fashion, but the United States, like you were talking about, we don't want to talk about it. It's kind of just an ignored topic. I mean, it's shocking to me how little our leaders, state, federal, wherever, have discussed healthcare for Americans in a time when, healthcare is so tied to jobs and people lost so many jobs during the pandemic. And, a pandemic is when you would think healthcare would be the most important. Why do you think we just wipe it under the rug like we do?
It's a very difficult problem. First of all, healthcare in this country is the largest segment of the American economy. It's over $3 trillion a year. And if we start to screw around with that, that opens up a whole can of worms. I personally believe we ought to blow the whole thing up and start over again. But you have to admit that doing that would be extremely painful. And we want to do anything but have that pain. I think we've got to face the music and start over again. But people ignore it because A, it's very complex and people feel they don't understand it. And B, when you touch one strand of this massive confusing web, you disturb all the other strands. I believe that the system is so complex because it's made complex. Lobbyists spend millions of dollars a year trying to figure out ways to hide money in little secret rooms and hallways, and money that they then know how to extract. So you're up against a lot of powerful forces if you're going to start to deal with the healthcare business.
You brought up the African American and Latino communities, and you said that we're either not paying them. We meaning, I don't know if you meant the private businesses like Walmart and Amazon, or the U.S. government, maybe a minimum wage like they've been debating in Congress, which didn't pass at $15 an hour. But you said we're not paying them enough. We're not giving them the benefits. Can you expand on that a little bit more? And what do we do to solve this problem? Because it's, like you said, it's very complex, extremely, extremely complex. Do we just blow it up, like you said, or are there other things that we could do, like pass a minimum wage bill or a freedom dividend?
Well, of course, we should pass a minimum wage bill. I mean, think about it. $15 an hour is still barely a livable wage. And for some places, it's not a livable wage. And yet, we couldn't get $15 an hour through Congress at the moment. I hope that they are going to try again. They have said they will try again. That should be just the minimum low bar. Currently, the national federal minimum wage is $7.50 an hour. The people in Bryan, Ohio, where the hospital is set, a lot of those people work full time, and they still qualify for Medicaid because they're still not making much money. So you're asking people to work hard, work full-time jobs, and yet they're not getting paid enough by these private businesses, which is one part of your equation that you just laid out. The other part of that is health insurance. So if you are in Williams County, where Bryan, Ohio is located, in the far northwest corner of Ohio, again, that's where the hospital is set, and you work for the Menards Distribution Center, you make $14.50 an hour, let's say. That's barely enough to live on. And then you have to pay a good chunk of your own health premium for the corporate health plan. And on top of that, you often have a $5,000 deductible. So for many people who work there, $5,000 deductible might as well be $5 million deductible. So they just don't go to doctors. I had a woman in Bryan tell me, she goes, no, my family, we have to be dying before we go to see a doctor. And unfortunately, oftentimes, people are literally dying before they see a doctor. They don't get preventative examinations. They don't go in for testing. They just hope that problems are going to go away, and those problems get bigger and bigger. And then, in the end, it winds up costing everybody, you, me, everybody, a lot more money.
Well, look, the healthcare industry, to me, it's disgusting, and I'm sure your book covers a lot of the issues when it comes to how much they charge patients, the lack of price transparency, really, really bad just medical care. I don't know if you saw research from multiple places, including Johns Hopkins, that found that medical error, medical negligence, hospital-borne illness, the healthcare industry, FDA, all contribute to over 500,000 deaths, third leading cause of death in the United States. There's a lot of problem in the industry, and like you said, you have lobbyists just covering everything up who are paying off politicians, and nothing is getting done. And it's hard. It's like you said, unless you blow it up from top to bottom to top, it's difficult. But going back to the whole idea of a $15 minimum wage, who's going to pay that? You expect the employer to pay that? Like I'm a small business person, and I can tell you I can't afford to pay my guys $15 an hour. If I had to do that, then I would have to pivot extremely and either find another business, shut that down, or lay off a bunch of people.
There have been studies. I don't know about your personal situation, but there have been studies that, in fact, in states and localities that have passed $15 minimum wage, It does not drive unemployment. Look, I think there's an argument to be said that if you have a business with employees and you cannot pay them $15 an hour, then you ought to be looking at your business. Now, again, I'm not making a comment about your particular business. I don't know about that.
You're right. I agree with that.
I think that if you're making so little money that you can't pay somebody $15 an hour, then there might be an inherent problem with your business.
Yeah, well, I somewhat agree with that in that you're right. Like the business is not a multi-million dollar. It's a small business. Most businesses, I think, over 80% of jobs in the United States are through small business, not through big corporations. Not working at ExxonMobil or Intel or Facebook or IBM. Most are small businesses. And look, my solution, because I tried to hire people within the U.S. and that's what they demanded. They demanded $15 an hour, $20 an hour. And I said, you know what? Whether I can afford it or not, it's just a lot cheaper for me to outsource. So now 95% of our company just outsources to the Philippines, India. That's how we do it because, again, we're paying a fraction of what we would pay. And I just feel like most companies will find loopholes like this to drive to make money, to drive their profit margins. And in my case, again, I'm not a large corporation. I'm just a small businessman trying to make a living for me and my family. And this is what I have to do.
Well, unfortunately, you're contributing to the problem by doing that. I think so. Whether or not you're a small business or a big business, you're following the path that a lot of big businesses have followed, which is outsourcing, or even within the United States, moving facilities from places like Bryan, Ohio, down to right-to-work states where they don't have to deal with a union. Amazon is dealing with this right now with the big election down in Alabama, whether or not there's going to have a union in that facility in Alabama. Look, workers are part of the equation here. If you want to do business in the United States, in my opinion, you've got to treat your workers fairly. If you're finding people coming to you and saying, I want to come work for you, but look, I need at least $15 an hour, that is not an unreasonable thing to ask. Because if you want to live in this country, you've got to make at least that much money just to survive.
Yeah, well, I guess I am part of the problem, and that's something that I'm going to have to accept. You and I disagree philosophically here, and a lot of it is, look, I don't know if you've ever started a business. I know you worked at CNB or at NBC, and you've written books about business, but starting a business is not easy. It's very difficult starting a business, making it profitable. I think over 98% of businesses fail within the first 4 years. So I'm pleased where I am, and I hope that the laws don't change and we're the work from home show. We work from home. We make money from our couch. That's what our subtitle is. And I hope that continues. I think that's a good thing for society as we move forward and become more innovative. Creative destruction, it has moved society, has progressed society forward. That's just I think.
But don't forget what came before you. So I don't have any doubt that starting your own business is difficult. I actually applaud you for doing that. But you are building upon a lot of public investment. You're not doing it alone. Oftentimes business people say, well, I built this all by myself. No, you did not build it all by yourself. I don't care what business you start. Just think about the internet. The internet was built by American tax dollars. Think about a road. If I have a Menards distribution center in Williams County, Ohio, tax dollars built the road and the transportation system so that I could move my product around. You exist in a framework that is largely tax supported. And so, for example, why do we have an airline industry in the United States? It's not just because of, brave pioneers in their small airplanes way back in the day. It's because the United States and the American taxpayer subsidized mail delivery that spurred the creation of airplane manufacturing, and the construction of airlines. So you don't exist independently all on your own. you get help, whether it's visible or invisible help, from the American taxpayer and the American government. That happens with every single business.
Yeah, and I think it's important, Brian, you were talking about the studies about minimum wage, and you have to look at it from a whole perspective. I mean, there are businesses that, a $15 minimum wage will hurt, but on the whole, they've found through all of the studies they've done, on the whole, it's great for the economy. It's great for workers. It doesn't, kill jobs on the whole, it brings new jobs in. And so it is beneficial, to society at large. You kind of have to say apologies to some businesses, but kind of, I don't know if Naresh is going to like this, but the greater good of society is at need here. In regards to,
but it's also self-interest. Think about self-interest. Henry Ford had a great comment when people said, "Look, why are you paying your early assembly line workers so well?"
So you can buy a car, right?
He said, "I want them to be able to afford to buy my car."
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to go back a little bit to the medical billing that we were talking about before. And this is just a short anecdotal story that I have. It's incredible to me. And Naresh was talking about price transparency, just dealing with insurance and insurance billing. I might have told this on the show before, but we had home births with our first two kids. And so I had to submit the paperwork to the insurance company to try to get reimbursed for the midwife. And it was an absolute nightmare. I mean, I had to know medical codes that they didn't have on their website. I had to submit things and just hope, they're going to tell me what prices they can pay. And then essentially they came back to me and said, yeah, we don't have to pay this, so we're not going to. Even though we then had our twins in the hospital, and, our midwife, the total cost was like $4,000. And the twins go to the hospital, and, one of them was, no problem, and it was like $10,000, $15,000 for the insurance company. I mean, it's incredible to me how we as a society, and this is going to show my liberal tendencies, are unwilling to, we say that we're scared of government making decisions for us, and we don't want the government dictating what insurance we can get or what procedures we can get, but we are perfectly fine giving those decisions over to a company whose sole purpose is to make money. And the best way for them to make money is for them to not pay for procedures that we need.
That's precisely right. Oftentimes when I talk to people about things like a Medicare for all, national health plan, that sort of thing, they say, well, look, my taxes might go up. And I say, you're being taxed right now. Every dollar that you pay to a health insurance company is really a tax. You're willingly taxing yourself. So if you took all that money that you are paying to a health insurance company right now for your premiums, and your boss or your company is paying, and instead you raised your taxes a little to help make up the difference, wouldn't you take that deal? And then they think about it and say, oh yeah, a good example, in Williams County was a 72% Trump voting county in 2020. I went to business owners in Williams County and I said, let's hypothetically say that I can make your entire health insurance bill go away, and you will no longer have to spend $350,000 a year insuring your employees for your share of their premiums. That goes away. But I am going to increase your taxes some percentage to help make up the difference of that. Would you take that deal? And they said, absolutely. For one thing, it would probably save them money, but for another thing, they never have to deal with health insurance again. It's a complete accident that we have employment-based health insurance in this country. It came about because during World War II, the government froze wages so that companies would not be trying to poach important workers like shipbuilders, airplane manufacturers, and so on. They wouldn't be poaching employees from each other, so they froze the wages. So what the employers did was say, hey, we're going to offer some benefits, and we're going to start to offer this thing called hospitalization. So if you have to go to a hospital, we'll help pay for that. That was the beginning of health insurance as we know it in this country, and it's completely by accident. We've not planned any of our health care system I think it's time that we do so.
Yeah, just a quick anecdote and then a question. Whenever one of our goals in my family is for my wife to cut down on her work and not have a W-2 job. I'm a 1099, self-employed person, as the work from homers know. Just to get on the exchange, just to get insurance right now, it would cost our family $2,000 a month just to have insurance and the right to pay a $10,000 deductible. So we would be looking at $34,000 a year if we actually had healthcare expenses before the insurance would pay a dime if we went on the exchange, which is just that $7.50 minimum wage, that's $15,000 a year if you extrapolate it roughly. That's nothing compared to the cost of insurance. But with the economy the way it is, with the pandemic, it has created the an even bigger divide between the haves and the have-nots. So with your book, The 1% Economy and the Shattering of an All-American Town, how are we going to go piecing together kind of society again whenever this comes up? What are some of the steps we can even start taking to try to, bring the two sides together? Because it seems, they're farther apart now than they've ever been.
Right. Well, I think that we need to clamp down on what I call the financialization of the American economy. So in my last book, Glass House, it was about the role of private equity, essentially Wall Street investment firms, using highly leveraged amounts of debt to buy out manufacturers, often in small Midwestern places. They buy them out, they load them up with debt, they extract value out of them and then try to sell them off again. That leaves unemployment, it leaves destroyed companies in its wake. A more famous example that a lot of people would know is Toys R Us. 33,000 Americans lost their jobs when Toys R Us went bankrupt. That was a private equity deal. This is gutting American communities over and over again. The second thing is consolidation. So turning back to the hospital, big health systems are consolidating. In other words, you go to a hospital, it might very well be part of a chain of hospitals as part of a giant system. The system buys up doctors' practices. They buy up real estate. Some are going into the hotel business. And yet, these are all typically nonprofits, officially speaking. I put nonprofit in quotation marks. And what they're trying to do is gain oligopoly pricing power in their regions. So, for example, in the example of Toledo, Ohio, you have a big health system called ProMedica. Rakes in over $2 billion a year in revenues, and they essentially control the market in their area. And what that means is they get to raise prices, and as evidence has shown, their quality of care is not as good. So you're paying more and you're getting less by allowing this giant consolidation. What then happens is, in response to the health systems, the insurance companies consolidate, and then the drug companies consolidate, the pharmacies consolidate. If you live in a city, try to find a pharmacy that's not a CVS or a Walgreens. That's because of massive consolidation and increasing pricing power. We need serious antitrust reform in this country.
It's amazing to me also, as I've learned, both of our wives are in healthcare, and it's amazing to me as my wife has been in healthcare longer and longer, how the common practice has become that the outpatient surgery centers are owned by the doctors in it. And, they have a steep financial interest in you only going to their surgery center. And that seems like, it seems wrong to me that they're making so much money based on them forcing you to go to their facility that they own and make so much money.
That's often true, and those surgery centers are often really controlled by private equity companies, by Wall Street investors. So here's another example. So often if you go into an emergency room, the emergency room doctors do not work for the hospital. They work for an emergency room staffing company. And typically the largest staffing companies are controlled by private equity investors. And so you are then out of network, and they can charge you whatever they want to charge you. And the emergency room that is at the center of the hospital, my new book, that is staffed by a private equity-controlled staffing company.
As far as your book Glass House goes, that's Glass House, a 1% economy and the shattering of the all-American town. You talked about visiting some rural areas, counties, I think all around America, including in Ohio. President Trump, former President Trump, what did he promise to change in rural America? And was any of that accomplished?
No. Look, no, he didn't. He gave some bailouts to farmers. Farmers were grateful for that. Often people who voted for Trump are farmers, and they hate socialism, but they really like those handouts. So, it was very unsuccessful. Trump didn't really do much at all for the economy. He inherited an economy on the rise. He then pumped a lot of money into the economy with the big Tax Cut Act that boomed the deficit, and that further juiced the economy. But he didn't really help these towns. He went to Lordstown, Ohio, and promised those workers at Chevrolet, at GM, that he was not to move because their jobs were going to come back. Well, they haven't come back. Trump was a disaster overall. In my book, The Hospital, I refer to Trump as a lying sociopath. And in fact, that's what he was. And it was destructive, not only to economies and local communities, but it was really destructive to the social fabric of our country.
Well, has there ever been a president who hasn't been a lying sociopath?
Yes, there's been many presidents that have not been lying sociopaths.
Can you name some names recently, at least in my lifetime?
I think you can tell where Naresh stands.
Do you think Joe Biden is a lying sociopath?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you go back to the 1990s, you can find all sorts of areas where he lied and sociopathic tendencies.
Name three.
Okay, well, number one is the agreement in Pennsylvania. So that's a rural area, Pennsylvania, when he said that he would not cancel the TPP. So that, can you affirm that's one of them?
What are you referring to? The trade deal?
Yeah, the TPP out of Pennsylvania.
Right. Well, I don't know about Pennsylvania, but he was for it. He was during the Obama administration. They came up with this was the Asian trade deal, I think, that you're referring to. If that's correct, then yeah, he did. And then he turned around during this election and said, no, that was probably a bad idea. Now, every politician will change their mind. Every politician will say things during a campaign. Trump lied every single day over and over and over again. He lied about and he lied about stupid stuff. That was the thing. Trump doesn't know how to tell the truth.
Well, how about when Biden said that we could go on and on, but there's with the vaccine rollout, he said Trump had nothing to do with the vaccine. His administration spearheaded the vaccine and the rollout, accusing President Trump of cutting funding for the CDC and the NIH, which Trump did not do. He did not cut funding for the CDC and NIH.
He tried to,
but he didn't.
That's because he was stopped. He was stopped from doing it. Look, he tried to. He kept saying over and over again, "We need to get rid of Obamacare," and he and the Republicans in Congress kept trying to do that. You know what that would have done? It would have gutted hospitals at the heart of my book. There are currently today over 800 rural community hospitals at risk of shutting down their doors and removing health care from these communities. And the only reason a lot of those hospitals are still in business and still serving people is because of Obamacare in those states where they signed on. So he would have destroyed that. if his plan had come through. He said he had a great, beautiful health care plan. There was never a health care plan. Never. I mean, there are scores of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people in this country that are dead right now because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, his dereliction of duty in the face of this pandemic is shocking, and we ought to be shocked to our core at the way he handled this pandemic. The only thing he did do was sign off on the vaccine program to try to get that research going. He signed off on it. Of course, he didn't do it, but he signed off on it. And so good for him for doing that. But it was chaos. Ask any public health expert at the county level if their jobs were made harder or easier by Donald Trump, and they will, to a person, tell you Donald Trump made their lives much more difficult.
All right. Well, that was a question about Biden and his lives. I don't know how it turned into Trump, but we'll get off that.
You're trying to compare apples and oranges. You're trying to compare the things that a politician says versus Trump, who has lied all of his life.
I didn't bring up Trump at all. I didn't bring up Trump at all. I just asked. You said Biden has never lied.
You went politician road, Naresh.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, they're politicians, so that's why I don't take sides. It's just the best liar wins, and that's just how it is.
Well, I don't believe that's true. I just don't believe that's true.
So what can we do? So Trump lied to these people. The Democrats, these people have felt abandoned by Democrats for years, which is why they flocked to Trump and his message. And I think it's hard to argue that the Democrats for quite a while just ignored the flyover states, as they call them, as a lot of America calls them. So what can we do for these states to help them along nowadays and kind of make them feel like part of America again?
Well, you're right. Democrats have a lot to answer for, too. I think personally that Bill Clinton's policies regarding these areas are coming home to roost. So I don't disagree with you there at all. If you ask some Democratic politicians from these areas, they'll tell you that it's hard for them to get the national party to pay proper attention. I think they're starting to do it now, but for the last 20 years, they haven't been. And that's unfortunate because they really need that help. I wrote a story for MIT Technology Review that's based partly on The Hospital, my new book, about programs that could help these sorts of communities. One is thought up by a guy by the name of Tim Bartik. He is an expert in economic redevelopment. He proposes an $18.8 billion plan, which is really pretty cheap in the scheme of things, to do things like, for example, have government-subsidized apprenticeships at business for people who are not going to be four-year college bound. We used to have apprenticeships in this country often operated through unions. Those essentially don't exist much anymore. And so a company hires a young guy or a young woman and says, we're going to help train you, and the government is going to help pay for part of your salary, and we'll pay for part of your salary. So these sorts of government-supported apprenticeship programs, local centers where, for example, transportation is often a big problem. So how about low-interest loans so that somebody can get a used car or have a used car paid for so they can get to their jobs? How about job training centers, job application centers, located specifically and tailored to the needs of local communities? This is all laid out in this MIT Tech Review story that's out this month, and it's hinted at a bit in the new book, The Hospital, also.
Brian, for our investors out there, you're kind of a boots in the ground guy. You go out, you actually visit the places. Did you go visit these locations for both books, Glass House and The Hospital? Like you lived there for a few months, got to know locals?
Yeah, no, I didn't just visit them. I moved there. So I moved to Lancaster, Ohio for a year, and I moved to Bryan, Ohio for a year. I rented a little house outside of Bryan, Ohio, bought a a Hyundai Accent with 140,000 miles on it. And I became part of the community. I don't believe in this idea of you parachute in and you take a look around and you write something. I really want to get to know the community. I want to get to know the people there.
Or I was going to say you work from home and just make a few phone calls and write a book, which many people do now.
Yeah, no, that's not the way I work. In fact, somebody the other day said I was very old-fashioned.
So why did you gravitate towards the rural communities? I mean, that's not the way most of society has been going.
I think this is the overlooked story in America. And I think, we just got off of Donald Trump. I mean, I think that a lot of the pathology of America is actually rooted in some of these places. Small towns, small communities, mid-sized communities, the old Rust Belt, places like upstate New York, the entire American Midwest, parts of the South. We have not paid attention to these places, and it has cost us dearly. I truly believe that we need to pay more attention. We need to fix these places, and we need to help people. Look, these are our fellow Americans, whether they're red states, blue states, whatever. These are our fellow Americans. I think that a lot of what we have seen in the last few years has really been a crying out for us to pay attention to what their lives are like.
So when you go to these rural towns, I'm curious. Do you already have the book deal in place, and then you go out there and you spend on your own dime, or you just get an idea, you do some research, someone tips you, and then you spend your own money, go out there, rent the homes, and go from place to place?
I go on my own dime and make sure that there's really a story there, a way to tell a story that I am looking to tell. And then I try to convince somebody that they should support that. And then I start to use their money. So, if you know how books work, typically, if they agree to that, they'll give me a little bit of money up front as an advance. And then I use that money for airfare, rent, buy a used car, to feed myself, all the rest of it, and try to squeeze a couple of pennies out at the end.
So you talked about what kind of the government can do, but what can the individuals do you think?
Really, you really should go to your doctor once in a while. A lot of stuff is caught early. So, the example of Bryan, Ohio and the hospital, when the Great Recession occurred, 2008, 2009, so much manufacturing in Williams County, Ohio, was really devoted to the auto industry. There are a lot of auto supplier people in the county. Well, the big auto companies declared bankruptcy. So everything in Williams County shut down. Unemployment was over 17%. People had no money. So what did they do? They stopped going to doctors. They did not get preventative exams like, for example, colonoscopies. Now, 10, 11, 12 years later, they're seeing a higher rate of colorectal cancer. Go ahead, get those preventative things. Meanwhile, take care of yourself. Eat and drink the right stuff. We all know what they are. Sometimes for many people in a place like Williams County, it's difficult because their grocery stores have gone under, and often they've gone under because of the invasion of dollar stores like Dollar General and Family Dollar, and they don't carry fresh fruits and vegetables and those sorts of things. So people end up with really lousy diets, which is unfortunate in Williams County because it's a big agricultural area, and yet people are malnourished.
Great. Well, Bryan R. Alexander, former columnist for NBC, best-selling author of the new book, The Hospital, Life, Death, and Dollars in a Small American Town. Check that out, as well as his previous book, Glass House. It did extremely well. Glass House, The 1% Economy, and the Shattering of the All-American Town. The website is bryanralexander.com, bryanralexander.com, as well as glasshousebook.com. Bryan, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners or anything else you want to promote?
No, I just want to hope that people take a look at the new book, The Hospital, because I think it's more about it's more than just about one little hospital, one little town. It's really a book about America and where we sit right now. I think people will learn a lot. I certainly hope so. And I think they'll hear a good story. You know, I try to make the story a very human level story, not get bogged down in a lot of policy and wonkiness. And people will learn how this sort of thing really affects actual people living in these places.
Brian R. Alexander, thanks for joining us on the Work From Home Show. And to all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. Leave us a message at hello@workfromhomeshow.com. It was a very animated interview with Brian Alexander. We'd love to hear your feedback. Again, that's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. Leave us a review on whatever podcasting platform you use, TuneIn, Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify. We'd love to send you something free if you take a screenshot of your review and send it over to us at hello@workfromhomeshow.com. And until next week, keep on working from home.